All right, everybody. Welcome to the Unraveler Show. This is going to pop up on the screen here in just 1 second. There we go. How's everybody doing tonight? William, Bill the Butcher. Love it. Welcome, man. How you doing tonight?
Doing good. How about yourself?
I'm great. I'm so happy that I switched to StreamYard. This is so good. For the first time in weeks, we've been able to actually get us online. And I'm assuming we're up. So if anybody is watching and you would like to share a comment, please do so we can see the comments. That would be awesome. I would love to see that you're actually there. So apparently, this is my first time using it live. So this is cool. So hopefully I see the comments come through here like I'm supposed to. And we should be good to go. In theory, William, we should even be. Hey, Eastgate Adoptionist, thank you. This is working. Hallelujah.
We can actually see these guys chat. That's awesome. Yeah,
that's right. I know, it's amazing. And then we can even pop the questions on the screen later. So for clarity, this is great. So very happy right now. Things are actually working well technologically. Finally, so. Now we have to talk to you and deal with our discussion here about the subject of your book tonight, which is that atheism says religion. How does it state it again? Religion is the cause, or is trying to make up reasons for. I forget the exact title of it. Religion is an attempt to explain the unknown.
I would say it like this: the bad atheist argument would be that religion is an attempt to explain unknown phenomena, and I think that's a bad argument. I don't think it makes a lot of sense anthropologically, and it certainly doesn't describe what we see taking place in religion. The idea would be that many hundreds of thousands of years ago. Our great Neanderthal grandfather was outside and it thundered. He couldn't explain why it thundered. So he said, God must be beating a drum. And therefore, that's the reason for thunder. And that sort of naive, ignorant way of seeing the universe was sort of layer upon layer until we get to the present time. And, these religions have remained. And I guess maybe a secondary thought process is because they emerged from this ignorance of the world around them that this is an accumulated, accepted ignorance that needs to be unraveled and unraveled, right? And then the Enlightenment kind of takes this, kind of gives this a bit of steam when it sort of challenges some scientifically held views by religious people that were wrong. And so there you go. So this is the idea that religion is essentially this layers of misunderstanding of the universe, attempts to explain things we don't understand, phenomena that happen in the universe, and that is what religion is. And I say that's not what religion is. Does it make sense just from a strictly anthropological view? And my counter view is that there's something psychologically wired into the human phenomenon, human experience that makes us have a propensity toward religious type thought and behaviors. And that to see religion from that sort of view is the more correct view. Whether you agree with the claims of any religion or not is maybe secondary to that. But the reason and the function and the purpose of religion itself, if we're going to, and this is particularly if you're going to take sort of the antithesis and the attack of, you shouldn't be religious because religion is ignorant. I think we should be fair with the subject of what religion is really about. I'll add one more statement and I'll let you kind of respond. The caveat being that there are numerous different types of religions that make various types of claim. They have some similarities, a great deal of similarities, in fact, in thought processes, but they do also make various different claims. So, but that still goes to the point to saying that they're all accumulated ignorance, essentially, is a bad argument, a bad description of religion.
All right. So awesome. Before I respond, I'm just going to say, even though I'm really excited about whatever there's a StreamYard, I am extremely tired tonight. We just got a new dog from a rescue, and
Mhm.
it turns out they were feeding it wrong. It was dehydrated.
Wow.
We didn't know. We got this thing, and it's super sick. So we've been like trying to bring it back to health, and it's been
Yeah.
exhausting. Late nights. My partner Ray, she's always going in and out taking care of it. So my brain's not at full capacity. So this is your chance to make a comeback, Will. This is
Okay. Okay.
this is
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
So that being said, if I'm stumbling over my words and my brain is foggy, I might need you to remind me of some things. But at any rate, let me see if I can attempt to respond. So my first comment is, I do not think religion is an attempt to explain unknown phenomena. I think religion is an attempt to control people. I think God is an attempt to explain unknown phenomena. So I would still distinguish between those two, as we've done from day one of our discussions. You've even made the agreement with me that theoretically we could have religion without God. It'd be an oddity, but I can roll with that. See where you're going. We can discuss that further. But no, I don't think religion is an attempt. I do think God is. But being as you've already admitted, we can't know for certain whether God exists or not. Then we also can't know for certain whether he or she or it is, attempting or doing anything, any phenomena whatsoever. So since we can't know that either, it's almost like let's try to get our feet wet with things that are a little bit more grounded, that we can have a little bit more certainty about. And when I say a little more certainty, I mean I would use the word maximum certainty, because you can never have 100% certainty about anything. Honestly, you can have maximum certainty, and that's based upon things we agree on, as we've discussed in the past. We both agree we're not brains in a vat. We both agree most likely we're real people living here dialoguing. You would say, I would imagine you would say we would both agree that we are living in this world that we see, touch, taste, right? Even though there are anthropological issues that we may not be able to explain. But that being said, since this is the world we live in, and since the reason we agree that we're not just brains in a vat, it's because we can empirically look around us and say, yeah, this is the most likely scenario. This is why we can have a conversation. To go from that to God as the answer for anything is still beyond me, in a very strange jump in any way, shape, or form. But that being said, I would still not say religion is an attempt to explain unknown phenomena, but I would say God is often that attempt. When we don't have an answer to something, our immediate leap is it must be something supernatural. And I don't see why that has to be the case. I still struggle to grasp that.
Sure. And I think, one of the things that I talk about in that chapter is, if we were to, for the sake of experiment, imagine a pre-religious human person, the inventor of religions, if we could imagine that person. And I talk about the scenario that would have surrounded that type of person. And this is a hypothetical thought experiment type scenario. I'm not saying this ever happened, but in order for religion to exist, this scenario would have to happen on some level. But this person, and if I were to just say I'm going to approach it from an agnostic or atheistic point of view, this person is a human being. So in order for them to have religious thoughts about the universe, they have to be able to think. They have to be able to process information. They have to have time to think, which that means that they have mastered their environment to the point that they do have the leisure of contemplation. So they're intelligent. They're not ignorant people. And then they have probably, based on what we know about early human beings, we know that they are probably hunter-gatherer type societies. So they know how to follow patterns. They know how to follow weather patterns. They know the behaviors of animals that they depend on. They know how to turn those animals and their environment into shelter. They know how to cook food to keep from getting parasites. I mean, these are not dumb people. And I would say that you think about someone from the Amazon rainforest or some places in Africa or Australia. These people may not live our lifestyle, but they are not unintelligent people. And in their environment, they would make us look like idiots. They know how to survive, and they have a lot of information about that. Point being, this is not an ignorant person. This is not a mentally deficient person. This is an intelligent person. And then that person, these individuals will need to master cause and effect. So they know that if I'm going to build a fire, I need fuel. I need it to be hot. I can't put water on it. And what I say in the book is everything in their environment says material cause and effect. There's nothing from the environment that screams to them that the answer to anything should be beyond a material cause. So you have an intelligent person who lives in a totally material cause and effect environment and comes to the conclusion that existence itself depends on something beyond existence, beyond material existence. Not only does he come to this conclusion, but he is able to indoctrinate, as far as we can tell, the known human population with this idea. This is so what I'm saying here is this whole knowledge gap thing certainly itself doesn't answer that phenomenon, and the phenomena itself is exceptional. It's a very, if we had pockets of people in various parts of the world who are religious, and then we have populations of people who weren't in any way religious, then we might say, well, that's cultural. But when every human population, we do not know of a human population anywhere that has ever existed that did not have some sort of form of religious belief and practice, to the point that it's impossible not to say that religion is particularly human type phenomena. Explaining that phenomena is something that needs to be done with a bit of honesty and clarity. Just saying, and I could go on about that, but what I'm saying is this idea that religion, and you said, well, religion is used to control people. Well, then that's not working very well, because it fails at controlling people. People routinely in religious societies do things against what the religious society says. That's the reason we still have law courts and police departments and to enforce laws, because religion isn't controlling people. So I don't think that's a good answer for the phenomenon. And I come from a psychological background, and I feel like that the real purpose of religion is, again, I've said this a lot, is religion is how we interact with reality. Religion is the way that we rationally interact with reality. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and say that's at least a part of my definition of religion. Religion is a way that people choose, and the word choose there being important, to interact with reality. It's how they describe the reality. It's how they explain the behaviors that they have in relation to the reality. And this then goes into things like, how do we treat other people? How do we treat things around us? How do we interact with the environment? That's a better explanation of what religion is than explaining unknown things, or just, quite frankly, just ignorance. People didn't know what was going on, so they made something up. That doesn't explain that very well to me at all.
All right, a lot to unravel there. All right, so how do I start here? Best place to start. Would you agree, just on this basic statement, without trying to imagine where I'm going with it, just a very basic statement or question, I guess. Would you agree that our scientific understanding of things in this world has vastly improved over the years? Do we know more today than we did 1,000 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So if we start there as a basic premise, to me, I can say that is an easy way to explain why people all over the world adapted to religion as much as they did, and it's losing its grip on us more and more today. I see people becoming atheists by the droves now. It's crazy. So I think the more scientific advancement we have, the less people are seeing the need to hold on to and embrace religion. So the fact that it had it was so large over the years can easily be explained by that simple fact right there. So that's the first starting point. The other thing I want to say is you had said something about people not being ignorant or whatever, and I read in your book that you said atheists think that the religious or the theists are ignorant. I forget the exact quote. I have it, but is that good enough? Was that close enough to what you said?
There's certainly a good number of atheists that do make those sorts of arguments.
Okay, as long as you're comfortable. I didn't quote it exactly, but I think that's the gist of what you said. And I would say, obviously, you've read my book. I do not think the reason people are theists is because they're ignorant. I think it's because they're brainwashed. I think they're significantly different things. I don't think anybody who is brainwashed to believe something is ignorant, stupid, or dumb. I think the reason they believe it is because they don't know anything different. They're trained, indoctrinated to think a certain way. So that being said, if in fact religion, theism was the best explanation for things prior to science, because we just didn't have the advancements that we have, and people are always going to be looking for answers. I mean, I'm always looking for answers. I mean, it's not like I sit around like, it doesn't matter. I'm curious. I want to know, just like everybody does. So you search, and when you don't have a better answer, you tend to land on something that you say, well, this will work for now. The problem is, I think with theism, it became such an indoctrination that it didn't just work for now, it worked forever. We have to hold on to this. And I think it's because people got brainwashed simply because they were latching on to anything that would give them hope from this idea of sin or, whatever, this evil in the world that they think needs to be resolved. So I don't think you have to start with a theistic idea and then say that that's the only reason people were able to find explanations for things, because otherwise they'd be ignorant. No, I don't think that that's true at all. I think that very likely, once upon a time, somebody came along, and first of all, people are creative, especially, you read all these legends and these myths. They're very creative. They're incredibly vast and robust in their explanation of details of how these kings and gods, worked or whatever. So when you see that, it starts out very easily as just mythology, people writing stuff, but that becomes such a big part of culture that that it's very easy then to come along and somebody that either believes for themselves that they had a vision or an experience with some god, or they're just genuinely trying to deceive people. We don't know. It could go either way. We don't know whether Joseph Smith was a complete, deceiver, or if he genuinely believed what he saw. I don't know. Whichever the case is, he easily manipulated people into believing what he saw. So I don't think that's hard to do. I think you can do it. I think it's very easy to do if you are in the right circumstances where people are latching on to things that can provide explanations and solutions to a problem they think they have. In fact, I do want to read one quote from your book, or at least one, but I want to read this one especially because I found it very interesting, and it leads into this where I'm going with this. First of all, before I read the quote, chapter 1, you started out, and your whole argument there was that atheism is a religion. That was what you made this case. You were vast, and we got to a point where we clarified that it's not atheism, but atheists, because they had developed worldviews or whatever. But not all I would still not consider myself religious in any way, shape, or form. So I would still balk at that. But you made the whole argument that atheism is a religion. Then you get to the third page, I think, of your book, very bottom, and you read this quote, and it kind of was odd to me because it's a complete contradiction to that first chapter. You wrote, if atheism is correct, then at some point in history, we have human beings that are not religious.
Right.
Well, how can that be? Because if atheism is a religion, then how could atheism have existed without being a religion? You just said there's people who are not religious.
Yeah, the first sentence was, if atheism is correct. It's not.
Well, no, not according to you, it's not. But that's beside the point.
I mean, showing inconsistencies in it as a worldview doesn't prove it's correct. It proves it's incorrect.
But your argument isn't that atheism is a worldview because atheists are wrong. Your argument is atheism is a worldview even if you were right.
Right. The atheist claim is that
and therefore
there is a human existence without religion. That's an atheist claim. So for them, the default human position is atheism. And then religion comes in and perverts the mind. So if atheists are correct, then
but you said that at some point in history we have human beings that are not religious.
If atheists are correct, but they're incorrect. There's no point in history where that happens.
Well, yeah,
but I'm allowing them to have. This is what I call allowing a thought experiment. So you can see a point to explore an idea, and so. In that instance, we're going to concede and allow. I don't agree with it. I think it's incorrect. Doesn't match archaeology. Doesn't match anthropological studies. Doesn't match psychological studies. Doesn't match sociological studies. It doesn't match anything really. But to concede the point and follow the experiment and to pursue the atheist definition of religion, there would have to have been a time in history where human beings are not religious at all. And then someone comes along and you said, well, Joseph Smith brainwashed everybody. Well, Joseph Smith is too small to have brainwashed everybody to have religion. Joseph Smith reacted to a religious propensity in the human population. He didn't create that. He manipulated that. Okay, that's two different things. Okay,
okay, fine. On what grounds do you have that Christianity didn't do the exact same thing?
Manipulate the situation of people's hope for religion.
Yes.
I wouldn't necessarily say it didn't. Manipulation, and I will need to clarify that again from a psychological background. A lot of people, when they say manipulate, they see that as an evil thing. If your house is on fire and I come in screaming for you to leave, I'm trying to manipulate you. I'm trying to cause you to react to me. That's what manipulation is. I could probably restate that. Joseph Smith didn't create the religious feelings of humanity. He caused them to react based upon that. Okay, I could say it the same way. And Christianity did the same thing. Matter of fact, we say, a particular Orthodox Christians say, and probably I think to some degree the Roman Catholics would as well, is that Christianity succeeded so quickly and so well because of the religious beliefs of the people that it encountered, not in spite of them. So yeah, we did the same thing. We gave a concept and a view that collaborated and aligned with a great many of people existent at that time on the planet. So there's nothing there. But the point being, going back to this, is religion is a phenomenon. It's something that happens. And I'm going to say this: atheists, a lot of times, the way that it is debated about religion, about belief in God, it's a denial of the reality that is easily perceived and saw before us. God is not something. God is an intrinsic part of human thought process that a religion is. So explaining some of these things is not contrived. It's explaining phenomena that's around us. I did not create religion. I didn't. It's a part of the culture around me. But if atheists are correct, I don't think they are, then the reality would be that at some point in time, there should be a population, majority of the human planet has no religious beliefs. But again, very successful. They can hunt, they follow herds, they know weather patterns, they're surviving. And these people come to the conclusion for no apparent reason that there's a supernatural or above natural or a transcendent reality that
I wouldn't say for no reason whatsoever. No, because that almost that almost kind of plays into your argument, like you're making it sound like unless they had some definitively great reason to believe that it's God, that they would have done it. That's not true at all, and it's also not without any reason whatsoever. Look, when you don't have the science that we have, that we already agreed advanced, and you're looking around for answers to things that we don't even now, like I can give you an example now, even that I don't know that we've discovered the answer. Conscience, for example. How does that work? Are we still, the only conclusion the theist wants to jump to is, see, it's God because you don't have a better answer. No, that doesn't mean it's God because we don't have a better answer. It just means we don't currently have a good answer. That's all that means. It doesn't mean it's God. Just defaulting to God because you don't have a good answer is never a good reason.
And defaulting to no God because you don't have a good answer is not a good reason. Neither one of those are good reasons to default to anything.
But there's a vast difference. Hey, dude, wow, dude, there's a huge difference. All right,
let me have to explain how there's a difference.
Let me try to draw. I'll try to draw this analogy. I've used the football field before. So the evidence that supposedly points to God is insufficient to actually get you to Yahweh. You've already admitted that. Nobody can know for certain, because if there was enough evidence to get you all the way across to the 100-yard line or the 0-yard line end zone on the other side, we would all believe God exists. But we already know that there's not enough to take you there. It takes faith to go the rest of the way. So the evidence for whatever you call God takes you about 50 to the 50-yard line. All right, let's just give that analogy. I'll give you the 50-yard line. So it takes us that far. All that evidence does is just point to something. It says, hey, there's something that made this happen. Okay, nobody's arguing against that. The theist gets to the 50-yard line and says, aha, victory, that points to something, God. And we're sitting here as scientists. I'll just throw myself in that category, not that I am one, but just for the sake of making a point. You're at the 50-yard line and say, whoa. No, we're all here at the 50-yard line, bro. What we need to know is what's at the 49-yard line and the 48-yard line.
You're not. That's the point. You're not all at the 50-yard line. 99% of humanity is in the end zone dancing, and the 20% of atheists are at the 50-yard line asking for everybody else to explain what they believe. Do
you have the winning evidence that takes us to Yahweh so that you can recant your statement that you don't know for certain that God exists? Give me that argument.
Do you have the winning evidence that keeps you at the 50-yard line?
I don't want to stay at the 50-yard line, but we have evidence that starts taking us in that direction. Look, maximal knowledge. Science has taken us much further than the evidence for theism. Science takes you back down that count to the end zone. It may not have gotten to the end zone, but it sure is a lot closer to the end zone.
Earlier on, you argued when I said that it's a myth that science vindicates atheism. Now you're saying science vindicates atheism.
No, it doesn't vindicate atheism. It vindicates knowledge. Atheism isn't making a case. Atheism doesn't fall into the picture. Atheism never left the first end zone to get to the 50. I don't care about that. Like, I'm simply at this end zone saying, whoa, you guys are jumping all the way. Like
okay, you said earlier, it points to something.
Sure.
But that something just can't be God.
No, it can be. But you can't. But the difference. Let me finish my point, because you interrupted my analogy. Let me finish.
Mm-hmm.
So the theist literally has nothing more than that 50-yard line of evidence. Your Honor, I know a human killed this person, and I know it's this human. Well, how do you know it's this human? Well, you just have to have faith, Your Honor. That's essentially what the theist does. You get to the 50-yard line. We have all the proof in the world.
You're oversimplifying that. Go ahead. You're oversimplifying. Yeah.
So you literally get to this 50-yard line where everybody and anybody can agree that, hey, there's enough evidence here to say there's something that brought this all about. We're going to try and figure out what that is. Great. From there, science actually uses empirical data to test things. And it starts to evaluate things that can be observed, things that can be tested multiple times and produce the same results, things that can be recorded and tested again. You get to these things, and then those propositions turn into actual theories, because those theories are facts as long as you have the maximal knowledge credibility there, where you're saying nothing can be known absolutely. But as long as we're granting the parameters you and I started the show with, then they're giving you things that we call theories, and they call it facts. but also within the same parameters we said earlier. Of course, we don't know with 100% certainty that we're not brains in a vat. So science can only say we are maximally certain based upon these parameters. But if we discover something else, of course we're going to change. Of course we're going to rediscover. Of course we're going to move and try to get closer to that end zone. Like that's what we're trying to do. Theism doesn't do that. Theism stops at 50 and they say, hey, we're just going to jump to the end zone and say it's God. And we know that we know 100% certain.
It's not correct.
And I need your evidence that shows one bit of proof.
That's not correct. And then, first of all, a couple of things you're getting. First of all, we're going back to it. We argued earlier that science doesn't vindicate atheism, but you're still using that. Empirical science has proven how to boil water. It's proven how the planets it hasn't proven any. It's proven none of the things that you're claiming that are necessary. It hasn't disproved anything. Science measures things, and we've agreed. We discussed that. That's what science does.
And how does it measure God? Tell me.
You're at the 50-yard line, and you refuse to move. But the reason you refuse to move, you say there's no evidence. But then you're saying
refuse to move. I move with science because there's data to say, hey, there's a reason to take this step.
But if there's a something, and you said there was a something out there that is the cause of everything, then that moves you from 50 to the 51st yard line. You're not at the 50-yard line anymore.
Well, no, I would even contend that it could be nothing. I'm simply saying we don't know, but we know we came from something.
Does nothing sound like a rational explanation to you?
There is actually a mathematical equation that I've seen that demonstrates the probability that could happen. Now, it is insanely minuscule that it could ever possibly happen. But of course, if you have the amount of time it would take to get to that minuscule possibility, then sure.
Yeah, those mathematical formulas have numerous problems. And that's the reason they're rejected by most of the scientific community, because nothing doesn't produce something. Nothing here. Okay, time out. We're going to reject the idea of God because it's possible that something science has never demonstrated could happen, even though all the math and all the science say it can't happen. I'm sorry, dude. That's more faith than a lot of Christians have. I'm sorry. You have a lot of faith that the answer can't be God. And then you're at the 50-yard line, but you've already admitted there's something out there. I would say, so when we start defining, that's the problem. I can't get you off the 50-yard line, because once we start defining what that something has to be, based on what we know, not based on what we have to guess at, but what we know, that something starts taking on attributes and more looks exactly like the being described by classical theism. Everything that we know about the physical world, cause and effect, the cause has to be equal to the effect. You can't have an effect that's greater than the cause. The cause has to at least be equal to the effect, if not greater. So the cause of everything has to be greater than all the material world that we know. It has to be able to explain life and therefore be greater than life. It has to explain consciousness, therefore be greater than consciousness. It has to explain being in general, therefore be greater than being. Just those categories alone describe something very godlike. Okay, so I'm not sure why you're stuck at the 50-yard line, because there's plenty of reasons for you to move forward.
I'm not stuck at the 50-yard line.
If I had a picture of a YouTube picture of God, that's not the evidence we're looking for the God of classical theism.
The
God of classical theism is, well, help me then. What is it you're trying to say?
I did not say I was stuck at the 50-yard line. I said theism only takes you to the 50-yard line and then leaps to the end zone without any further evidence to demonstrate that this thing is God.
That's not how that works.
Absolutely how that works.
As a matter of fact, when I'm arguing for classical theism, it's exactly the opposite. It's exactly that. What I'm doing is I am rationally creating propositions and deductive arguments that say, and this is something I said last week, and this is classical Orthodox apophatic theology, is the more we say about this reality, we're never drawing a line around it and saying but we're saying it has to exist behind everything that we see that exists. And here's the reality. This is a reality. This is scientific reality. Before the Big Bang happens, something has to exist. Something. You say, what's nothing? Well, when you call nothing, it becomes something. And that's a very, people who epistemologically, if you define something, even if it's nothing, it becomes something. Nothing is not even a real existing category. Something had to exist. Well, it's another universe. Okay, well, something existed before that. Well, it's another universe. Then you have infinite regress. That's a tremendously terrible philosophical and scientific problem. We can't have it. There's millions of mathematical reasons that you can't have an infinite regress.
But they have produced theoretical solutions to that infinite regress that absolutely
no. Work. And this is a point where atheists will grab a hold of the hypothesis of an idea that could be and say, well, science. No, they haven't. Nothing that has actually happened in mathematics or science has ever solved that problem. That problem is a massive problem. It's a huge problem. Infinity destroys many equations. They don't work mathematically. It doesn't work mathematically. So you have these infinite regresses of the material universe that don't work with anything we know about science or math or physics, but we hold on to them because if we don't, then we have to say there's a stop. There's a point in that infinite regress where everything comes to a stop, and that point has got to be the explanation for everything that we see. Okay. And so, well, I don't believe that there's this conscious willing being that's causing everything to happen. Yet everything that I experience all day long is interacting with conscious beings that are willing things to happen. Every order, every language, the thought processes, even the language and the thought processes that it takes to say, I don't believe there's something out there, it requires the kind of things that we're rejecting. So to me, it makes zero sense to say that all of this, everything that I experience, reading, I've talked about art, beauty to the point where it's become ridiculous. Everything that exists is not better explained by something totally unlike the things that do exist. It has to be something that is either equal to or greater than that. And let's say that would lead me to a conclusion that either is pantheistic, which is a conclusion that many people have come to, that the full sum of all things is God and is divine, or has a sacredness to it. I can give at least some credence to the point that makes some sort of sense. It makes sense that things that exist are equal to their cause, but not exactly, because we still have this infinite universe that goes on forever with no reason for it to exist. There's another view called panentheism, which means everything within the being of God, and that's really more of an orthodox view. That makes more sense. What doesn't make any sense to me, what seems utterly irrational to me, what seems to have no explanatory value at all, is to say that absolutely, utterly nothing, whatever that might be, caused everything to exist. That makes no sense to me at all.
Well, I'm not a proponent of that. I'm simply saying there are possible answers from the nothing viewpoint. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm not saying I know any of these things for certain any more than you know your God for certain. And I guess that's the dilemma I'm up against. Is I'm still trying to grasp why you desire God so much when you don't know he exists, and why you choose to submit to yourself to church leaders and freaking a book that teaches you how you're supposed to live instead of just living your life, man. I don't understand.
Well, I didn't give myself my life. I didn't wake up one day and create myself and decide, you know what, after I've brought myself into being and existence, I think I'll choose to no, I don't even have an explanation to my own existence. I don't remember the first 2 or 3 years of it. And here I am. And here I am able to think, to see, to learn, to understand, to comprehend. And let's be honest, Alan, me and you would both agree to this. The naive way that I was taught about the world when the ideas of, God one day, Monday, he decides he's going to create everything. He starts, Tuesday, I'll make some fish. Wednesday, here's some stars. Friday, he finishes up, we'll make man. Saturday, boy, it's been a long week. I'm tired. Take the day off. We'll just nap. that seems kind of, that literalist sort of way. That doesn't make sense to me. I'm not going to tell you that it does. And then, some of the things about, the way the Old Testament is interpreted, very wooden literalistically, with no sort of dimension to it, no ability to see any error or contradiction or nuance to it. That doesn't make sense to me either. A matter of fact, I early on, I said, it's very possible that all that's false. Let me consider that fact. I come back to those things not from a perspective of, oh, wow, after I looked at all the scientific data and watched these last 3 Ken Ham videos, which I totally disagree with that dude, in all of his cohorts. I didn't come to that. I come to it this way. We are thinking beings. I mean, have you ever thought about the fact that you look out of your eyes, you see the world around you, a vision is created in this space somewhere, and you perceive the whole freaking universe. I mean, you can imagine, you have a concept of galaxies, and this is in a world where the cause of that is supposed to be mud and millions of years of lightning. And I will say this: if tomorrow I looked on social media and it says scientists have found a way to zap, certain biological proteins and cause them to form a DNA cell, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about that suddenly just something poofed out of existence. Maybe it all did sort of chain react from this one moment, but that is extremely rare phenomena, isn't it? That all that, and so bottom line, and we talked about not knowing, and I think the way I said that may be misunderstood, because I understand, and I do come at things from both a scientific and from a psychological standpoint. And what I mean by knowing is a psychological standpoint. I can present you all the facts in the world about something. And this is a phenomenon that happens quite often. For instance, people who have hysteria or schizophrenia, I can present you all the facts in the world about something. I can't make you believe it to be true. Truth, this belief that something is true, doesn't come from an argument or a set of facts. It comes from something within a person's psyche that says that thing is true. I believe it's true. And I know from a psychological standpoint, you can never dissect that intuition that believes things are true.
All right, so you literally went back to my very first comment that we started this whole series on at the very, very beginning. You literally are living by faith alone. And you said you didn't. You said you had reasons for the existence of God. And all of a sudden it's faith alone.
No, you said faith alone. The word qualifier there, alone, is the problem. Now, if you said, are you living by faith? I'd say yes, and so are you and everybody else.
Again, you got to the 50-yard line and you leaped by faith to the end zone, and that's it. That's your life. You've just literally said you live by faith. Okay,
but you got to the 50-yard line and leaped by faith to...
I haven't leaped anywhere. That's the difference. You're... Okay. Let's say hypothetically, and I'm going to try 2 different approaches here. I'm going to start with this first one. Let's just say hypothetically. This is a huge hypothetical, but hypothetically,
sure.
We wake up tomorrow and the science community comes out and said, Eureka, we figured it out. We know with 100% certainty how this all worked, and they can prove the data and everything. We know how this universe came about and how it exists, and look, and everybody's just like, and it just all works, and there's like no problems, and it's just like glorious. Would you no longer believe in God?
I'd still believe in God, absolutely.
Of course you would. And that is the difference between you and me, man. That is huge. You're literally, your faith, you're so brainwashed. Your faith is keeping you.
But you didn't ask me why. You just assumed I'm brainwashed because I disagree with you.
But if you knew for certain.
Why would I still believe in God, Alan? Why?
Because you're brainwashed.
No, because things don't exist for no reason.
No, I just made the point that I just gave the analogy.
Your point was probably chapter 2, that science vindicates or disproves God. And what your point was, if science could actually cross the finish line and understand everything, then we wouldn't need God anymore. False. And that was a false belief of the Enlightenment. We can explain everything. We don't need God anymore. In this chapter,
I'm saying if science actually demonstrated that
the chapter we're talking about now is
if science actually demonstrated that God wasn't necessary to have this universe exist and proved it, you would literally still hold on to God because you can't let him go.
Beautiful question. So if science demonstrated that God doesn't exist, could you explain to me how they would do that?
I don't care. It's a hypothetical. That's what I said. I'm just saying.
You can't put me on trial and refuse to answer the same kind of questions.
What kind of question you want me to answer then?
The question is, if science were to be able to prove that God doesn't exist, how would they do that?
Well, obviously I can't answer that because they've never done it.
So you're living by faith.
I'm not living by faith in anything. How's my faith working? What do you mean?
Because you have faith that there's no way to prove God wouldn't exist.
I didn't say that. I said they haven't done it yet.
Let me ask you this question, dude. Do you live your life today?
Do I live my life today?
Yes. Do you live your life? Do you make decisions? Do you act?
Sure. Okay.
What do you base that on?
What do I base that on? That's a question I'm not sure. I've spent a lot of time thinking on. What do I base that on? Okay, I guess I base it on. All right. So first of all, I'm living simply because that's just the state I'm in. The only thing that can change that is if I killed myself or if somebody killed me. So the fact that I'm living. There's nothing that can change that except for death. So from that starting point, when you say I'm living and making decisions, sure, because I'm alive, and so circumstances happen. Life is going on. The culture we live in requires you make money to live and survive and eat. So you go to work and you do the things that you need to do. That's just what life is. So there doesn't have to be any other reason than the fact that here we are and we're existing. And it's just like the horse down the street just runs and gallops around because that's just what horses do.
Well, from a psychological perspective, if someone came to my office and said, I routinely do things for no reason, I would say, well, that's by definition unreasonable and by definition irrational. Okay. So,
well, no, but you're assuming a long-term obviously I have reasons in the moment for everything that I do, but you were asking a much more vast question, trying to get me to explain why there's a reason I'm living. And I'm just living because
I'm asking why you live the way you do.
Because I have reasons in the moment that make me do what I got to do.
And what are those reasons?
Well, I just said them. If I want to eat, I have to work.
Yeah, one of them you said it's because society tells us we need to do these things.
Well, that's because it's just the one we live in right now is a capitalistic society. So that's how you have to live. You have to work to live. So
what keeps you? What makes you submit to that?
Nothing except that I like where I live. If I didn't like it, I move and live on an island on my own. Just make my own rules up.
Okay, and so the thing is that you are living, you are reacting, you do make decisions, and essentially, it seems to me you said I have no reason to do that.
Well, I have no like I just gave them. I have reasons in the moment to do what I do.
You gave some minor cause and effects. You said we live in a society. You said I have reasons, but you really haven't given a reason or an example of anything you did. You just said I have reasons and I do those. That seems very vague and ambiguous.
Isn't if I want to eat, I have to work? Isn't that not specific?
You want to eat, and the only thing you do is eat.
No, if I want to have sex, I have to have a partner, and I have to be nice to her and good to her so that she desires me.
So you only act instinctively, like sex and food, nothing else.
Well, I literally just gave two examples. Do you want to spend the rest of the night going literally every single example under the sun?
I want to know how you interact with people. I want you to I want you to be real with this and stop.
If I want my car to run, I got to stop at the gas station and put gas in the tank. If I want to be healthy, I have to exercise. If I want to entertain myself. I have to pick up the remote and turn the TV
Why
on.
are you doing this?
I'm not done. You want me to give you every example under the sun.
Yeah,
So
why are you doing this podcast? Let's talk about something real.
Because I want to help people realize
that you want to
are brainwashed and they don't need a God.
Why do you want them to do that?
Because freedom is much better on this side. It's wonderful. Yeah.
Okay, so you believe it's true that it's better to be an atheist?
Absolutely, I believe it's true.
Why?
Because believing in things that don't exist is not a good way to live.
In what way?
Well, for starters, when you believe in things that don't exist, you are your mind is being deceived, and you are thinking things that aren't real. And then you have to follow the guidelines that this thing that doesn't exist tells you have to live. If you were a kind of
then everybody dies, and who cares?
Well, everybody does die, but it's not about who cares. I am a humanist, so I do care about my fellow humans.
100 years from now, nobody will care that you were an atheist and I wasn't.
Nope. Probably not, unless my book works and I, become a legend. That would be cool. But I also, I'd like to be remembered because, as I said in my book, if they ever figure out how to raise the dead, I'd like to be remembered.
Well, maybe so. But the point being is you do live, you do react, and you do react on things you believe. And you, whether they're small beliefs, whether they're large beliefs, where they have large structure, where they have small structure, you're still reacting in the same framework.
Right. And that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this podcast, because I think Christians believe things that make them do things. They act in ways that I think are harmful to both them and society. Okay.
But harmful is something that has to be defined by a particular worldview. And it has to, you've already talked about truth, and you've talked about being deceived, and you've talked about doing harm. And these are all very religious concepts.
No,
they're not.
Religion stole them. They're not religious.
We stole them from where?
From humanity. That's not a religious concept. All those things are just normal to life, dude.
Humanity stole religion from itself and started practicing its own. That doesn't make any sense. So where did we steal it from?
No, but I'm saying religion didn't define or create these terms. They're just natural terms to humanity.
Wow, they're just naturally existing terms?
No, I mean, we gave the terms to those laws, if you will. And
we named the laws.
We named. That's what I mean. Yeah, we named
it. But they are realities external to anything material.
They're realities. Say that again.
They are realities external to anything material.
Well, they only express themselves in material.
Well, expressing something material doesn't mean that it is material. That means it's the medium for expression.
Well, no law is material. Correct.
Agreed. Yes. Yes. So and that's another thing. We live by laws. They're not material. And we can talk about whether they have existence or not. This goes back to the idea of the purpose of religion, the belief in God. It's not irrational. It's not jumping from the 50-yard line to the end zone. It is, quite frankly, contemplating the universe as it exists and the realities that it does present to us. You can say, well, imagine if science explained everything. Well, science has been trying to explain everything for the last 500 years. And so far, we have cell phones and video games, and we still don't have most of the explanations that science said that they would give us.
Yeah, well, religion's been trying to explain it for 10,000 years.
Yeah, but religion has been fairly successful in what it's explained.
Not at all.
Oh, it really has, yes.
In what way?
Religion has organized society. It's created laws. It's created civility.
It's also done a lot of evils too. I'm not talking about things religion did. I'm stuck on the theist part, bro. We already agreed that if we can somehow have a religion without God and we can find some use for it, that we would separate it from philosophy.
What is the value of removing God from it then?
What is the value to having God is what I want to ask you.
Well, you have answered that question before. What is the value of not having God?
the value of not having God. I don't know that I would be able to give you a value of not having God. The value of not believing in a God that doesn't exist, that's valuable because then you're not, living a lie. But I mean, if there was a God and he was a good God, I would find that valuable. But as it stands, Yahweh is a terrible God. So I don't know why you'd want
Okay.
me.
Well, let me give you two concepts here. You brought one of them up. There's the belief in law, and you said it, and I agree. You're right. Law is not a material thing. It's a concept. It's an idea. It's an idea many people believe in, and it's a very valuable concept. Produces great fruit. And God forbid that we ever do without laws, because laws have protected man from violence and destruction, et cetera, et cetera. But you can't prove laws exist. There's the belief in God. I would argue that the belief in God and religious belief in general, but particularly belief in God, and eventually the belief in the Christian God, has produced tremendous results. As a matter of fact, Western society is based on those ideas, and those ideas have, over time, civilized the world, have shaped it in a more humanistic form. And so if laws are good and they've done good, they can be bad, but they mostly have done good. And if the belief in God is good and has mostly done good, what's the difference in those two beliefs?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat a little bit, just the last couple of sentences?
Sure. You got two concepts.
Yeah.
Both of them are idealistic. Both of them are not necessarily material. And both of them have had some negative effects, but mostly positive effects on the human race. What's the difference in those two concepts and believing in them?
Well, I mean, I suppose there wouldn't be. I'm not sure I'd have a good answer to that, because if you're saying they're identical in that regard, then that wouldn't be my reason for attempting to help somebody not believe in one or the other. There would have to be other reasons.
Okay. So I don't, and this is going back to what I said earlier, and I think what I said has been confusing, and it may be confusing because, quite frankly, Western thought tends to not think along these lines. When I say I don't know and I can't prove empirically the existence of God, that is one approach to proving things and establishing truth.
Well, no, but you can't know, because faith is not a measure by which somebody can know anything.
Yeah, but not even that. I don't believe that is the only valuable base of knowledge. I believe rational deductive reasoning is an equal, if not greater, way to achieve knowledge. Now, I can't empirically prove that God exists, but I can make a tremendously rational case. That
you can make a rational case that something exists. That's what I keep saying.
And I can make a rational case.
Yahweh. I mean,
Joe, you have to follow the rational process, which you have to allow.
Dude, if you're going to use the same litmus for every religion, and you're going to somehow demonstrate Yahweh is the only right, true God.
No, if you remember earlier, we talked about the various ways people view the universe. The Greeks viewed the universe as a dinner plate. Some of the ancient Hindus viewed it as riding on the back of an elephant or a tortoise. Neither one of those views are right 100%, but the Greek view is way better. It's more realistic. Not all religions are right, but they, both of them are trying to describe many of them are trying to describe the same thing. Some of them are better at describing it than others. And I believe the Christian religion, particularly the Orthodox Christian religion, is the absolute best. But before we get to the religion of Orthodoxy, theism is something that I can give a rational, deductive argument for. And I don't think there's good arguments against it. And the conclusion I've come to is this: if it's the best answer there is, and the other answers are not good, and there's no reason not to believe it as being true, then why would I continue to reject it?
Okay, so that brings me to, so that's the second point, the second approach I wanted to take earlier with you that I didn't get to. So why not take it? Okay, that's why I'm also an agnostic, not just an atheist, because I'm not just going to jump on the bandwagon, live a certain way, because it's the best of all options without any good reason to believe it.
Mhm.
I believe I have good reasons to believe in the empirical evidence and data that we have. I believe there's a good reason to believe that if I climb to the Empire State Building and jump off, I'm going to die. I have very good reason to believe that gravity is going to absolutely kill me. There's no reason I wouldn't believe that. That is a vastly different thing than leaping to God and saying, well, that's a good reason. That's not a good reason. Gravity is a good reason. But to my analogy, my second thing, let's just say well, this isn't even a hypothetical. This is a real thing, I think. Can we both agree that if we go as far back as we possibly could to figure out how this universe came about, we agree there is a universe? Yes.
Yes, yes, of course. Yeah.
We agree. We agree energy exists.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We agree that there are metaphysics that we may not understand, but there is definitely non-material things that exist. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We agree that we can't know with 100% certainty how this universe that has energy, gravity, metaphysical laws, and whatever, how it all came about. Can we agree there?
Well, I would say from a scientific perspective, we don't have any answer for that question.
So from a scientific perspective, which really we're starting with simply because we've already agreed we're not brains in a vat, only because scientifically speaking, we're going to avoid that as an option because we're living in a real world here. So we agree with all that. The difference between us, as an atheist, I simply go that far back and I say, we don't know. Unfortunately, we don't know. And, we don't know. And that's it. And if we don't know, we don't know. Do I want to know? I'd love to know, but I don't know. And in the meantime, I'm not going to make up an answer to fill in the answer for I don't know. I don't know is a perfectly good answer, and it's okay to not know everything. The theist, you, on the other hand, says, it's God. And I'm like, where'd you
come up with that? That's not a fair assessment of what I'm doing. That's not fair
what you're doing, dude. Then explain to me how you get from what I do.
It's not a fair assessment.
Explain to me how you get to where we just agreed.
You said I would. As a matter of fact, I'll accept your definition of where you're at, and I think that's fair enough. There's something in you that says I'm not satisfied. The answers I have are not satisfactory to me. I don't have them. I'm not going to say I do until I feel I'm satisfied. Fair enough. But me, it's not saying I don't know why things are, so therefore God. Matter of fact, I know that's not true. It's laughably not true because there were many years I was perfectly, if I would have come to the conclusion that was the reality and the answer for everything, I would have been satisfied with it and moved on. I returned to Christianity and returned to theism because of everything I explored and everything I studied kept leading me back to it. I mean, at some point I kept saying, well, this looks a lot like theism. This sounds a lot like theism. This feels like theism. At some point, I need to stop rejecting it. And this is not a leap. It is rationally deductible.
Why is God?
The biggest problem people have, and to be honest with you, and just my truest perspective, the biggest problem people have with the argument about God is people wonder why, if God exists, if that's the reason for everything, why is God not more readily accessible in everyday life? Why can't we hear God speaking? Why isn't things just happening all around us that are clearly evidences of God? I think people can say, yeah, the rational arguments seem to make sense. It does seem like something's going on here. But if that's the case, why is it so difficult to find God in a world that you claim is created by God? And I think that's a fair question. It's a question I wrestle with. Why is that the case? Why is it God more readily available? And I could probably, some of the answers I could say, well, maybe it's and if you're looking around, the miracles of life, et cetera, you could see, phenomena. But still, I mean, at the end of the day, I think people are like, I think that's the biggest thing. If God exists,
and I'll give you the answer. I know the answer. The answer is because your Bible, whoever created this religion, tells you have to live by faith, and that's it. And if you don't believe God by faith, then it's somehow a detriment to your life. So they keep you in this matrix by making it based on faith. And as long as you don't have, as long as you live by faith, you're good. And if you abandon that faith, now you can never see God again.
Yeah, and there are, yes, I mean that's true. You got people that teach that, and I think well-meaning people that take that approach. You can never have questions. You can never think about things. You can never challenge things. You can never admit you have doubts. You can never, have a day, and I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say I don't. I'm not going to say I don't wrestle. I mean, what I just gave to you was just a very transparent and honest, one of the bigger questions I wrestle with. I mean,
I appreciate that, by the way.
Yeah, no, and so I don't think, I think that's where it comes down to a lot of times. And I think that's why, people want to know that thing. And I've actually asked myself that question: what would it be that would happen in the universe that I saw, experienced, that I would say beyond a shadow of a doubt that I believe that God exists? And the problem is, I don't know if there's anything that would qualify. And I've even thought about, like, if I seen like a miraculous event, something like a glowing person appeared to me and said, "William, I am the angel of the Lord," and Yahweh. I can't, and if that happened and I woke up the next morning, I would still think, did I hallucinate that? Did I want that to happen?
Right.
So bad I made it happen. So even things like that might not satisfy.
Right.
And so I want to say two things here. I want to say I'm sincerely wrestling with those questions. I sincerely appreciate that people have them. I don't think they're contrived. I don't think that it's because people are the enemies of God. I think those are real questions that we wrestle with. But for me, I think that I found the best way to engage with the reality that I know. And I'm satisfied unless I encounter something that makes me think differently. I'm satisfied with the path I'm on. I don't think I know everything. I don't think I've come to every understanding. I think there's things about the Christian faith that still give me pause. Quite frankly, there's things related, miraculous things that are related that are difficult to believe. I've never experienced things like some of them. That doesn't mean they couldn't happen, but I don't want to sit here and say that I just know that I question, I've never seen that before. I've never seen things like that happen. So did they happen? Is this a metaphor, or is it something mythological? Is it a deeper symbolic meaning I don't know. I wrestle with those. I think about those things. I think they're fair enough. But I think even if you, and I've said this before, I know this to be true about where I'm at in a personal experience. I think if you were to say to me, here's some piece of evidence that says the entire Christian faith is false, and every religion known to man is deviant or defect in some way, I think I would still be a classical theist, because I think classical theism is the most rational answer in the most rational framework that I have encountered that explains reality. And I'm not alone. There's very many intelligent people across most people don't realize classical theism doesn't originate even from just Christianity. Many of the Greek philosophers helped to develop classical theism. It's not just a Christian view, but I believe that I believe something like a being or an entity, if you could call it that, that is described in classical theism has to be. There are other possible scenarios, but the other scenarios are more chaotic and harder to grasp than that. To me, it's almost impossible to imagine the world existing as it exists without some point of origin or reason for it to exist.
Well, I mean,
why does reason even exist to start with? Why are we even having this conversation? It just, and I'm not going to try to bully. And I've talked to people from my part of the world, and they get a bit frustrated because I don't bully you into some kind of argument of corner. I don't want to do that. I don't think that's fair. I mean, people do that anyway, you know?
No, that's fine. I know that about you. That's why I think our conversations are actually really nice. But so yeah, I don't know the reason why this exists. I don't have the answers. I'm up in the air, uncertain. Not always a fun place to be. Boy, do I wish I could just come at the theist and be like, "Hey, here's the answer," but I can't, and there is none. But I can no longer just live by faith that it's God, because here's what I wrestle with, or as you say it, wrestle with. You say roof or roof?
Roof. Yeah.
Roof? Okay, well, at least you're on that one. That's good. Anyway, so I was a Christian for practically 40 years of my life, maybe just a little less, because when I was a young boy, I first received Christ, but almost 40 years of my life, I was absolutely a Christian. I 100% had this faith, or at least I thought I did, right? So the dilemma I face, and it frustrates me tremendously, is that one of two things happened here. Either I genuinely had faith and then no longer had faith, which makes God kind of an asshole if you think about it, that he deceived me for 40 years only to take away this faith from somebody who truly lived. I wrote 2 books for his glory. I lived for his glory. I planted a church for his glory. I did everything living for this God. And it wasn't just an idea. Like if you read the last chapter or whatever it is, the second last chapter of my Journey Between the Veils book that I wrote, man, I talk all about God's love and how you love and the love of Christ. I'm like, dude, I was in it to win it, so to speak. I loved it with every ounce of my being. So that would be horrible. Like if that happened to you, would you want that God? No. Like that's just a shitty thing to do to somebody. And I know that your immediate thought is, yeah, we'll come back to the Lord at some point, maybe. No, I can't. That's the problem. I can't unsee what I see now. And so it's like, I'll never actually have that faith again. It's gone. I can't do it. The alternative, the other possibility is I was brainwashed, which I think is the case for all Christians. But let's just say I was unique. And maybe me and a few others like me, or thousands of us that all believed we had faith and lived by this faith, but we were just brainwashed. And you're not, just me. You're not brainwashed. I was. That also makes God an asshole, because if you think about it, why would he do that to somebody, one of his creation, to give them this life where they thought they loved him, only to, at the end, be almost like a trick, like, haha, you were just brainwashed. Bro, like, I see those, I'm like, in either one of those scenarios, that's an evil God. And that is why I'm fighting the way I am, because I want to free people from any God that would do that to somebody. That's a problem.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think that particular image of God is a product of probably the 1500s and quite frankly, I may make some enemies here, but the Calvinist type of perception of God. And it may be not just the Calvinists. I think the Roman Catholics and their view of hell and their view of judgment and those kind of things. And here's another idea. Maybe in the end, what we experience in this life as human beings forms us into something. And that something that we become is important for us. And maybe, if there was an eternal life, if there's an eternal existence and we are somehow his offspring, as saith some of your prophets, maybe what we experience and go through is important for us in our development. And maybe it's not about God trying to pick the few people he doesn't want to torture forever, but maybe all of us are being formed by life and by his will through that. And that's the reason I don't really panic anymore. I was 17 years old when I was an assistant pastor at a Pentecostal church. I was 20 something years old, got married. I didn't go to school back then because they taught us, why Jesus is coming any minute. You should devote yourself to the work of the Lord. I was a very devoted person. And to be honest with you, in the 90s, when I first encountered some of the ideas of full preterism, and you know what that is, and I know what that is. Some people may not know what that is, but it didn't make me feel like, yay, I found the answer. It made me think, oh crap, there's some huge problems. And the first thing I thought was, what if Jesus is a false prophet? What if he just went around saying stuff and it just never happened? I mean, that was the first thing I thought, and I couldn't shake it. And it drove me away. I mean, if you'd have met me, I don't know, 2011, 2012, I'm not a fundamentalist Christian at all. I don't know that I may use Christian language, but I don't see the world as a Christian anymore. And so I get that. And I do get that feeling of, why would you not let, honor my devotion, I can understand that feeling. I certainly can. For me, I don't know. Maybe there's something in me that wants to believe in the ultimate possible good, that wants to see good and meaning in things. And you've talked about this wager, and I've thought about this from a rational standpoint. If God exists the way I think he exists, and I don't necessarily think he exists in the way maybe other people do. I don't think he's sending people to hell. Not like that. I think we create hell. I think we create hell with our decisions and the way we act, and maybe that and probably that thing we create does have some sort of long-term, maybe eternal type implications. I'm not worried about people just, if they don't say the right prayer, and they die in a car accident tonight. That's not the way I see it. But if I believe in God exists and then it's not true, then the life I'm living now is not going to be a bad life. I enjoy myself. I have a drink. I don't restrain myself. I mean, I'm not going to be a jerk or some kind of, dastardly villain, but I enjoy my life. I enjoy my family. I enjoy what I do. I play in a band. I just do things. I live a good life. I feel happy. I feel like I do things that are good toward people. And I feel like I participate in the world in a way that's meaningful and makes sense to me and gives me a sense of connectedness. And if I'm wrong about that and I die, I don't think somebody would stand over my life and say, wow, what a tragic waste of a life. I hope not. And if I'm right, then even better. And and I don't know of another religion in the world, like most of the religions in the world really don't have that very strict, you have to follow our religious path. So in other words, I just really don't see a lot of risk for me in what I'm doing. It does seem like the best path, even from just I don't need to project that onto you. I don't need to say, Alan, you need to do what I do or else some tragic result will happen. Because here's why. Because if God exists, and again, I use that and I hope it's not confusing, but if God exists, then I didn't create you and I didn't create me. So you and me ain't my problem, other than I need to live the best way I know how to live, right? So I'm not panicking. I don't need to force you and bully you into being what I am. I really just hope at the end of the day that we can learn to understand why people believe what they believe and respond with some deal of respect to those things. And so I'll quit with that. I think I rambled a bit, but okay.
You did, but it was good. It was all very good, and I appreciated that. And I think one of my favorite things about having you on the show is your honesty. I love your vulnerability, and I think it makes it wonderful to talk to you. And I appreciate that. It's been a real delight. So we got some questions to end the show here. There's not a lot. I think 2 I see here. If everybody else has questions, please throw them into the chat right now because we are going to answer questions. First question comes from Eastgate Adoptionist. Do you hold any value to metaphysics? I think we answered that earlier, and I'm guessing this is directed at me, but since there's no person attached to it, we'll both answer it. I would say yes, I do hold value to metaphysics. I don't know how much value. I don't know what the answer is to all of it, but I believe in metaphysics. And as far as value is concerned, sure, because whatever the things are that aren't physical, they certainly have an effect on this world. So I would be foolish to not think that they were important.
And yeah, obviously I do as well. So yes, they are. I'm glad that you. I'm glad that you would. I think we should all work to agree to that, and I think we should be able to distinguish that from a religious connotation. I think it's important for our societies to at least agree that there are certain things that are important for us to hold as a society, even if they're not a scientifically vindicatable thing. In other words, the dignity of human life, things we would probably call humanistic type principles. Those are important. I don't care if you're an atheist or not. If somebody's mistreating you, if somebody's taking your stuff from you, if you don't have a fair chance to live, I should be the first person defending that, because by defending you, I'm defending myself. So metaphysics are important. So anyway.
Right. Appreciate that. All right. Next question from 21st Century Mind. This is directed at you, William. Uh-oh. This is one of the deconversionists, buddy. You're in trouble. Here we go.
All right,
William, William, would you stop evil happening to children instantly or wait 2,000 years?
Me being a finite person, if I could stop instant evil from happening to children instantly or wait 2,000 years. I don't know. I don't know, because you're talking about a lot of history, and I don't know the purpose of the children or the evil. I think as an individual, if I could stop evil in my context, of course I would. But I think I took my 3-year-old daughter to a doctor one time, and she needed immunization shots, and she didn't understand what was going on. I laid her down on the table and I said, they're going to stick you with a needle and it's going to hurt. And I said, just be ready for it. It's going to hurt. And I need to lay down and hold you still so that you don't jump. So she's 3 years old. She has no clue what viruses are, what immunization is. All she knows is her dad said, hey, I'm going to hold you down so they can stab you with something sharp and it's going to hurt. And she said, okay, Dad. And and really it breaks my heart today because of the trust she had in me. I knew that what I was doing was for her best good, and I didn't have the ability to explain that in that moment. So I think the idea is like, well, if God could do this stuff, why doesn't he do it? I don't know. I don't know the answer, but it's possible. And you could maybe at least admit it's possible that things happen that seem to be tragic in the moment, but with greater understanding, they may be done for the better good. And if you're talking about a being like God, you would probably definitely be within that category of possibility. And there was a comment here, goodness, he doesn't know. It helps if you wait for the rest of the answer before you post it.
Right. Well, but he makes one other comment, and this one I kind of agree with, and this is my concern. This is what I've been saying about God all this time. This is what religion does to the morals and ethics of grown adults, unfortunately. So, and what I think he means by that, and whether it is or isn't, doesn't matter, is what I mean by it. This is the concern I have with living for a Yahweh, living for a God, when you aren't sure anyway. You just say,
Wait a minute. I get it. I get what you're saying. But what you're saying is if it weren't for religion, we would instantaneously cure all the children of evil. That's not what's happening.
No.
We're dealing with reality and explaining it, right? It's not that we're not choosing to do it.
Bro, we're not saying that. We're saying if you are God, you could do something. And he's not.
But the argument sounds like that. See, because of religion, if he had the power to heal everybody, he wouldn't. No, it's a hypothetical question. You said, could I do it? And I'm placing it in the context of this discussion. And the broader, obvious context is, well, God's got the power. Why doesn't he do it? And my answer was, sometimes people do things that seem to be painful and tragic in the moment, but without understanding, you don't know what they're doing. I don't.
Dude, I got your analogy. I got your analogy, and yes, your analogy is fine. But the problem with your analogy is you're talking about things that you know for certain are good in the end, dude. In what way is rape a good thing of a 12-year-old kid? You tell me that. What does God possibly have in store for this kid to be raped at 12 years old? How is that good in any way, shape, or form?
Well, I mean, if I could take a large step back, and we are talking about God, I don't think it's possible to grant free will unless there is the possibility of that person committing evil.
I mean, okay. Here's another statement to follow up. God killed Uzziah for touching the Ark of the Covenant instantly, but allows grown dogs to touch and molest little boys.
Okay, what's your point? What's the point of that?
I assume it's making a
The
parallel.
The point is because you don't understand everything about the existence of the universe, God can't exist. But then when I say you need to give reasons for the universe, we don't need a reason. But God needs a reason to explain every instance of everything that happens, or he can't exist. But you don't need a reason for the entire universe. That's called being inconsistent. Also, it's called purposefully being myopic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It really is. It's being purposely myopic. You understand?
Bro, did you just literally say that because we don't know how the universe came about, and because we can't give a reason, that parallels it to God, the Yahweh, the master of the universe, that can control and do anything he wants, but decides to let children be raped?
No, what I said was, you say that you don't need a reason for the existence of the universe, but I have to give you a reason for everything that happens.
Because you're talking about Yahweh.
Or God can't exist. No, that's not what you're saying. You're saying I have to give an answer for every phenomenon that happens that you don't understand. If I don't, God can't exist. But I asked you for a reason for everything existing, and you say I don't have to give a reason.
No,
okay?
That's not what we're saying.
Nobody's here is arguing. Nobody's here is arguing. And let's be honest. And this is where this conversation becomes dishonest. Oh, something bad happened. If you're a Christian, that means you love bad things happening. No, it doesn't. I give a reason why things could happen that are tragic, but they could be for the greater good. Now, if you can admit that, then you're being honest. And if you say, I know everything, then please tell us everything, because we're here waiting for you to tell us everything.
No,
if you don't know everything, then what you could say is bad things happen, and we don't understand why they happen. That has zero, fat, giant, flaming zero to do with the existence of God. It's a cheap shot question for somebody who's trying to have an I got you moment.
No, it's not.
Doesn't have enough honesty to say, I don't know why.
It's not.
I have enough honesty to say
not
that.
Cheap shot, and here's why. If you could have a world where you didn't have to inject your daughter with pain to save her from some virus, would you do it?
If I had a world where I could fly like a monkey through the trees, would I do it? That's hypothetical.
No, it's not hypothetical.
Really, it is hypothetical. There's no
save your daughter from that.
We're not living in that world. We're not living in that world.
We're living in whatever world God wants, and this is obviously the world God wants. And I'm asking you, if you created the world, would you do that?
So we're living in a world that God wants, and we don't understand everything about it. I'm going to ask you, Alan.
I'm asking you specifically.
And also, 21st century mind, I'd like to ask you this question as well. I gave a scenario where I asked my daughter to do something extremely painful, and from her perspective, the only thing she could derive from it was pain and trauma. Is it possible that God could know something if a God exists? Is it possible that he could understand a value to things happening that we don't understand? Is it possible? Yes or no?
Yes, Tristan, I know it's you. So it's a good question for Tristan. So here's going to be my suggestion, because we are down to the last minute that we committed to. We don't want to be going forever. This is fun, even though we're heading on a high note here, but that's okay. It's bound to happen at some point anyway, with an atheist and a theist talking, so it's fine. So here's what I'm going to suggest. These are some great questions, and I do, William, at some future episodes, still want to press this idea of why God is not willing to create a world that doesn't inflict pain. Because as a dad, I have no doubt that if you could create a world your daughter did not have to suffer like that, you would.
You have an infinite knowledge of all things to make that judgment from, right?
No, I don't.
No, you do. So doesn't make it, and it's not an argument.
The question isn't whether or not God has infinite knowledge. The question is just you, with what you know, would you?
But that's not the situation.
Why can't you just answer it? It's simple. Would you?
I did answer. I said if I could stop something from happening, I would. Okay. But I'm not going to stop a lot of things that I don't understand from happening. Why would I do that?
Yet you understood very well that by giving her this injection, it would bring about something good. How did you know that?
Because,
how do you know that?
You're right. I believe that. I
You
believe
believe
that
that. Exactly.
Yeah,
Just like you
I
believe
acted on
God
my beliefs.
exists and creates this world to do what it does. So I'm just saying,
But
like,
I'm not making Alan. I'm not making the choice to have bad things happen to people because I believe in God, which is the assertion that I guess it's Tristan's making, and it's a terrible and it's a misguided argument. It's not representing what's happening. We're talking. I don't know exactly everything. I don't have any answer for every phenomenon. I'm not saying God exists because I don't understand everything. I've not said that one time. Now, this is a cheap shot. If somebody gets raped, would you stop that? Well, God didn't stop it, so God must be evil. Or there are other things going on that I don't understand, which is also a possibility, which Tristan doesn't seem to be able to admit, which is dishonest to me. So,
all right. So here's what I'm going to suggest. I think you and Tristan need to have a debate.
Sure, let's do it.
I don't want, because the last thing I wanted, and I didn't mean for this to happen, and I do apologize to you, my guest, William, that this became 2-on-1 for the last 5 minutes, and I apologize. That's never my intent. I didn't want.
I'm good. I'm not. Listen, I'm not mad. I love you guys, and Tristan. I'm glad to have a punching match. It's fine, but I'm going to meet the energy level. Me and Alan are kind of talking intellectually. If you're going to challenge like that, I'm going to punch back. But I'm not mad at Tristan. He's welcome to punch at me. At the end of the night, I'm going to be happy, and I am not mad in any kind of way.
All right, cool.
But yeah, go ahead. I don't want to hijack. You're right.
That's all right. But I don't want to go on all night. I don't, and I know we have to end this at some point. There is one last question from Tristan. I'm not going. I promise you, I'm not going to try to push it any further or let him. You're going to answer this one last question as honestly as you can, and then we'll end for the night. Sound fair?
Good. Let's do it.
And then next week, the chapter we're supposed to be on is there evidence for God? I feel like we beat that horse to death, but there might be things in their chapter there that are a little bit unique because there's a reason you must have put it where you did in the book. So we'll talk about that next week. Last question, William. Oh, no, that's not the one. Can't wait to have a discussion. Here's the last question. William, in the new heaven and earth, will there be evil happening to kids?
I'm going to say no.
Okay, fair enough. And with that, thank you for joining the Unraveler show tonight. We appreciate you guys commenting and asking these questions that made the ending really kind of fun.
I'm having fun. I really am. It's all good. Yeah, I love it.
Dude, William, you're honestly one of the best guys to talk to ever, man. I really, really enjoy this. It's so cool to be able to have this kind of a dialogue with somebody, even get heated, and at the end we're laughing because I really consider you a friend. And
yes, absolutely, yes.
This has been a true delight. So next week, round 7. Can't wait. See y'all then. Good night.
Night, guys.